The courtroom was tense even before Judge James Boasberg opened his mouth. Every seat in the federal courtroom in Washington, D.C. was filled. Cameras weren't allowed, but nearly every reporter in the city had managed to sneak in. On the stand sat Tom Homan, a former acting director of ICE. He was supposed to give routine testimony about current immigration protocols. But nothing about this day was going to be routine. As Homan began explaining migrant vetting procedures, Judge Boasberg suddenly interrupted him. His voice was sharp, dripping with sarcasm. "Mr. Homan, your so-called expertise on immigration matters," Boasberg said, leaning forward with a smirk, "is about as credible as a child's lemonade stand financial report." The courtroom went silent. Gasps and a few awkward coughs echoed through the chamber. Homan's face tightened. But before he could respond, Boasberg raised a hand like a scolding teacher. "Save it. We've heard enough of your xenophobic fantasies." Seated beside Homan, co-counsel Pam Bondi stood slowly. Dressed in a cream blazer, she adjusted her microphone and spoke calmly, though her eyes were steel. "Your Honor," she said, her southern accent soft but firm, "I'd like to remind the court that Rule 614 grants witnesses the right to complete their statements without interruption or harassment." Boasberg slammed his gavel. "Sit down, Miss Bondi, or I'll hold you in contempt." But Bondi didn't sit. Instead, she reached into her leather portfolio and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "If the court insists on silence," she said, "perhaps Judge Boasberg would like." To explain this, she handed the document to the bailiff. It was a bank record clean official and damning. "The judge," Bondi continued, "has received monthly deposits $15,000 each from the Open Society Foundation since 2020. Care to explain that, Your Honor?" Boasberg's expression dropped. His lips pressed into a thin line. A few reporters began typing furiously. Before the judge could react, Homan spoke again. His voice was quiet, but the words carried weight. "And maybe while we're at it, Your Honor, you'd like to explain your secret meeting with Secretary Mayorkas last month at Caf Milano? 2 blocks from here. No security detail, no calendar entry." The tension in the room hit a new level. Boasberg's hand reached for his gavel again, but this time the click of a door interrupted him. Chief Deputy Marshal Rebecca Jones stepped into the courtroom, her badge visible, her stance steady. She walked straight toward the bench, flanked by 2 armed marshals. "Judge James Boasberg," she said firmly, "by order of the inspector general's office, you are under arrest for bribery, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and violations of the Judicial Conduct and Disability Act." The gallery erupted. People stood up. Reporters yelled questions. Some tried to leave to file this story before anyone else. Others just sat in disbelief. Boasberg turned pale. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. His robe fell open as one of the marshals pulled it from his shoulders. Another read him his Miranda rights. As he was led away, his former power stripped. Before a stunned courtroom, Bondi leaned toward Homan and whispered, "That was the moment we waited for." Across the gallery, unnoticed in the chaos, sat journalist James O'Keefe. He hadn't spoken once, but his camera pen had caught every word. He leaned back in his seat, tapped a message into his phone, and smiled. "Uploading now," it read. Chaos didn't end with Judge Boasberg's arrest. It had just begun. By the time the news broke online, the clip of the federal judge being handcuffed mid-hearing had already gone viral. Within hours, it had been dissected frame by frame across major networks, podcasts, and social media threads. Hashtags like #BOASBERG bribe, #Homan trial, and #Cafe Milano meeting trended globally. The public wanted answers, and they wanted them fast. But inside the courthouse, the scene had shifted from drama to high alert. Court security scrambled to secure Judge Boasberg's chambers. Staffers were told to remain in their offices. Phones were confiscated. The Department of Justice had dispatched internal affairs agents within minutes of the footage leaking. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Pam Bondi and Tom Homan were escorted by federal marshals, not under arrest, but under protection. Cameras flashed in the lobby as journalists shouted questions. "Ms. Bondi, do you have more documents? Mr. Homan, were you expecting this to happen? Did the CAF Milano meeting involve Homeland Security planning?" Bondi held up a hand, signaling no comment. But the glint in her eyes said everything this was far from over. Back inside, Chief Deputy Marshal Rebecca Jones remained behind to oversee the immediate investigation. She was calm, professional, but even she couldn't hide the unease in her posture. As a career law enforcement officer, she had arrested judges before, but never one who sat at the core of so many political trials. She called for Boasberg's private office to be sealed and ordered a forensic sweep of his court-issued devices. "Secure his laptop," she told one marshal. Get a full audit of courtroom transcripts from the past 6 months. But what concerned her most was something else entirely: the envelope Bondi had handed her just before leaving. It wasn't just the bank records. Inside was a second sheet, far more cryptic. A classified-looking memo marked DHS Internal, eyes only, and stamped in red. Program Aurora Tier, for clearance required. Jones didn't recognize the document. And that's what bothered her. She dialed a secure DOJ line and requested a meeting with the acting attorney general. The room cleared fast. Meanwhile, in a quiet cafe across town, James O'Keefe sat, with a burner phone and a hard drive. He had already offloaded the footage, watermarked and encrypted. As he watched the news cycle spin out of control, his inbox began filling with messages. One caught his attention immediately. It was from an encrypted address. No name, just a subject line. "We warned you not to follow this." Attached was a blurry image of surveillance still showing O'Keefe himself entering the courthouse. That morning, he blinked, then smiled. Too late, he stood, paid in cash, and left. But someone was watching him from a parked black sedan down the street. A man in a gray suit picked up a phone and said only one word: "Confirmed." Back at the DOJ, the acting attorney general reviewed the memo Bondi had submitted. His face remained unreadable, but when he got to the second paragraph, he leaned forward sharply. It mentioned something about a judicial relay directive, a term he'd only heard whispered in secure counterintelligence meetings. He looked at Marshal Jones. "Whatever this is," he said, "it's bigger than bribery. Much bigger." Outside, news crews were setting up tents. Protesters had already arrived, some waving American flags, others holding signs accusing the judiciary of deep corruption. The energy on the street felt less like politics and more like pre-riot tension. And in a secure facility, Judge Boasberg sat alone in a gray holding cell. His expression was blank, but his fingers tapped a steady rhythm on the metal bench. 3 short taps, 2 long, 3 short again. A pattern, a signal. And somewhere far away, in a sealed basement data center lit only by green terminal screens, a monitor blinked to life. A hidden protocol activated. Label: Aurora Judicial. Override node DC01. The system requested authentication. It received it. The storm wasn't on the horizon, it was already here. That night, news anchors spoke in hushed tones, usually reserved for terrorist attacks or presidential deaths. Judge Boasberg's arrest had rocked the legal and political establishment like a rogue wave. But what unsettled the nation more was what came next. Silence from the White House. No statement. No briefing. No tweets. And then a leak. At 2:14 a.m., a redacted PDF file surfaced on the darknet, then reappeared on a known whistleblower forum under the heading Judicial Compliance Memo - Aurora Prime Nodes. Attached were 3 images: a top-down map of federal courthouses, a list of code names labeled bench assets, and what looked like a behavioral pattern chart. Names on the list included not only Judge Boasberg but also 3 others: Judge Laura Kenning, 9th Circuit; Judge Rafiq Dowd, Eastern District of New York; and a mysterious identifier. Alpha C3 Aurora, DC. Within an hour, Twitter caught fire again. At a secure safe house in Arlington, former ICE Director Tom Homan sat across from Pam Bondi and James O'Keefe. A military-grade signal jammer buzzed quietly in the background. Bondi pulled out a tablet. That wasn't just corruption. She said Boasberg was part of something layered, classified judicial protocols. We just yanked the wrong thread. Homan leaned in. Explain, Aurora. Bondi tapped the screen. It's not public. But I've seen glimpses before buried. In DOJ interagency memos, it's an override mechanism. Designed post 9/11s. In theory, it gives select judges the power to suppress or redirect national security trials without oversight. O'Keefe frowned. So they can rig trials. Not exactly. They're not rigged. They're rewritten. Evidence omitted. Testimonies altered. Conclusions already shaped before the gavel even falls. And get this, Aurora wasn't controlled by Congress or the executive. It was autonomous. Homan exhaled. So who gives the order? Silence. Then Bondi answered. According to the leak, it's not one person. It's an algorithm. They all stared at the screen. A blinking terminal line appeared. Someone was watching them remotely. Someone with access to the Aurora node. The screen flickered. A new message appeared. Stop. You've already seen too much. O'Keefe snatched the tablet and disconnected it from the network. They're inside. Pull the drives. We go analog now. Back in D.C., DOJ officials were scrambling. 2 more judges were reported missing, one from California, the other from New York. Their homes were empty, phones off. Security details had vanished. Surveillance cameras at both locations glitched the exact same way, 3 seconds of static, followed by a strange symbolist circle inside a triangle overlaid with the word Authgate. Marshal Rebecca Jones, now appointed to head the Special Internal Judicial Inquiry Task Force, reviewed the footage. Her jaw clenched. They're disappearing witnesses. She turned to her team. Issue protective custody orders for anyone tied to Boasberg's previous trials, attorneys, clerks, law enforcement. But ma'am, one agent interrupted. The Aurora log shows your name too. You're listed as override eligible. Jones blinked. That's impossible. Her phone buzzed. A single message, integrity compromised. Exit immediately. Outside the DOJ building, an unmarked black SUV idled too long at the curb. Inside it, a man in a dark gray suit checked his watch and muttered into an earpiece. She's about to move. Confirm C3 location. At the same time, inside the Capitol, Congressman Jim Jordan paced through the Judiciary Committee wing. He held a copy of the leaked memo in one hand and a burner phone in the other. I need answers. And if no one at DOJ gives them, I'll go public, he told the voice on the line. The voice replied, low and even. You'll be silenced like the rest. Jordan paused, then louder. I've already released it to press. You're too late. And he hung up. But across from the Capitol, in a private law firm known only to insiders as Boxgate, an old man watched a live camera feed of Jordan's office. He turned to his assistant. Time for phase 2. If Aurora is breached, we pivot to protocol. Eclipse? The assistant asked. The old man nodded slowly. The part where the judiciary disappears. ... And something else takes its place. At 9:03 a.m., the Capitol buzzed with tension, but it was a different kind of unease. One that didn't have a shape, but spread like fog through corridors, briefing rooms, and media vans parked outside. Something was coming. Everyone could feel it. Inside the Judiciary Committee chamber, Congressman Jim Jordan prepared to open emergency hearings into the Aurora leak. The committee room was standing room only. Press badges flashed from every direction. C-SPAN cameras were rolling, but their feed had a 6-second delay standard protocol. Except today, that delay had been forced by a quiet request from the DOJ's Digital Integrity Liaison. Jordan tapped his microphone. This hearing is no longer about Judge Boasberg. This is about how the American justice system was quietly turned into a black box machine one, where algorithms decide truth and judges become handlers. Gasps from the room, he held up a USB stick. We have forensic copies of the Aurora kernel. We also have testimony from multiple whistleblowers, some of whom were threatened just for speaking to me. Then he dropped the bomb. We've discovered that 13 past immigration cases, including two involving sitting senators, were reprocessed by the Aurora system under something called Protocol Eco 7. These weren't just redactions. These were reversals. Cameras snapped. Phones lit up. Reporters typed furiously. But somewhere else, behind the scenes, the pushback had already begun. In a secure data facility outside Langley, Virginia, a subunit known only as CR4 Theta activated silent lockdown. A voice echoed through the PA system. Containment mode, Tier 2. Triggers Alpha Gate, Delta Gate, Echo Gate. One analyst stared at the terminal. They just opened Echo Gate. Her supervisor paled. That's not damage control. That's purge protocol. Back in D.C., Tom Homan and Pam Bondi were being rushed into a black car by federal protection officers. Bondi clutched a file marked Unseen Cases 2022-2024. She turned to Homan. Tom, you need to understand. Every time you stepped into court during those years, someone rewrote your record in real time. Even your wins were losses. Homan gritted his teeth. It's the country I fought to protect, never even heard the truth. No, she said, her voice heavy. They heard a version of it, just enough to keep you useful. Just then, the car stopped. Not at the safe house, not at DOJ. They had been rerouted remotely. A drone hovered in the air above them. Second later, the car's dash lit up in red. Auto override route set by C3 node. Bondi grabbed Homan's arm. They've hijacked the convoy. At the Capitol, Congressman Jordan's testimony was suddenly cut off mid-sentence. The C-SPAN feed went black. In its place, a frozen frame of the House seal. And the words, "Signal interrupted, National Continuity Protocol 9 in effect." All phones in the room vibrated simultaneously with a presidential alert. But no president had issued it. Simply read, "Return to position. Interference detected." At that moment, on the steps of the Supreme Court, independent journalist James O'Keefe began a live stream with no script, no filter, no cutaways. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how long this feed will last. But if you're watching, know this: judges are disappearing. Witnesses are being rerouted. And somewhere deep in this system, a machine is rewriting the truth in real time. Then he held up a hard drive. This contains every Aurora protocol trigger from 2016 to 2024. If you think this is conspiracy, ask yourself why 4 federal judges have vanished in 48 hours. Back in the SUV, Bondi manually overrode the door lock. She and Homan jumped out as the car screeched to a halt in a closed parking structure, only to find themselves face to face with a figure in a gray overcoat and gloves, holding a tablet. "Mr. Homan," the figure said calmly, "your case has triggered Echo Gate review. You are now a classified asset under Section 12 of the Civic Containment Charter. Please comply, or escalation protocols will be authorized." Homan didn't flinch. "You want my silence?" he growled. The man responded without blinking. "No, we want your submission." Bondi stepped in between them, raising her voice. "You forget one thing," she said. "You just made him a symbol. And you can't redact symbols." The man smiled faintly. "That's where you're wrong. In Aurora, everything is redacted eventually." The underground garage was still echoing with the sound of tires when Homan and Bondi ran down a side stairwell. Boots slapping concrete. Bondi gripped the sealed file tighter. They had escaped the drone barely, but they were no longer alone. In this, above them, in a surveillance room hidden behind a maintenance door. A technician watched their every move on a bank of silent monitors. He pressed a button, echo gate breach confirmed. He said, "Target Homan, still active. Bondi has the package." Hoptoes, his voice was calm. But on another screen, 4 words began flashing in red. Aurora Truth Vector compromised. Meanwhile, inside a quiet tech hub posing as a university research lab in Northern Virginia, a whistleblower waited. She wore a badge that said Myra Langdon, Systems Archivist, but few knew her real title, Echo Retrieval Specialist. She had once helped build Aurora. Now she was ready to dismantle it. The moment she saw the live stream go dark and the phrase National Continuity Protocol 9 flash across the web, she knew it had started. She opened a secure channel on an old military laptop, tapped in a code, and whispered into the mic, "They'll come for me, but I have the index." A pause. Then a voice replied, "Do you have the original signatures?" Mira's eyes darted to the encrypted drive taped beneath her desk. "I do, and I'm sending them to Bondi." She hit send inside the Department of Justice. Attorney General Lisa Chen stared at a wall of flat screens showing split feeds from news channels, surveillance drones, and traffic cams. One image kept looping. The moment Judge Boasberg collapsed in court, another showed Congressman Jim Jordan demanding a probe. But the most troubling feed came from an internal DOJ system. It showed tampered case histories, names once cleared, now flagged, files edited mid-trial, and a blinking alert. Immigration cases 2019 to 2024, 7,142 altered. Chen turned to her aide, who had access. Only 2 divisions, Mythos, Compliance, and Aurora itself. Chen leaned forward. "Den, it's time we confront Aurora." As the SUV sped down Rock Creek Parkway, now a stolen FBI vehicle. Driven by a friendly agent from Homeland, Bondi clicked open the encrypted message from Myra Langdon. Homan leaned over to read. Inside were signed directives. Real memos. Real timestamps, showing that Aurora hadn't just altered legal cases, it had reversed criminal rulings for politically favorable actors. It had erased exculpatory evidence for witnesses in ICE investigations. It had even flagged internal critics like Homan as hostile assets. Bondi whispered, "This is bigger than we thought. This isn't just judicial corruption. This is digital. Control over law itself." Homan's jaw tightened. And someone built it to survive discovery. This wasn't a leak. It was a test. They wanted to see who'd chase the truth. They looked up as the agent spoke. "We've got 10 minutes to Langdon. After that, I can't guarantee your safety." From the back seat, Bondi dialed a number she never thought she'd call. The White House switchboard answered. She didn't ask for the president. She asked for the vice president's chief of staffs, someone who still had the clearance and maybe the courage. "Tell her," Bondi said, "we're bringing proof of a silent coup inside the justice system. She'll know what Aurora is." But inside a Pentagon war room, a different conversation unfolded. A general stared at a map of digital firewalls across judicial networks. "They've breached Tier 3, he said flatly. "Should we initiate Protocol Null?" A senior intelligence official stepped forward. "No. If we strike now, we expose the system." "And if we don't?" asked another. The answer came from the shadows, an older man, face half-lit. "Then we let them run, just long enough to find out who else knows." He stepped back into darkness. "After that, wipe them clean." 10 miles away, as their vehicle neared a disguised parking garage beneath a historical museum, Bondi received a text from an anonymous source. Read, "You're about to meet Myra Langdon, but she's not the only one watching. Want the real files? Look beneath room 39? Homan raised an eyebrow. "Room 39, Bondi replied without looking up. "In North Korea. That's the name of their black finance division. Deep secrets. Hidden power." She turned to him. Whoever sent this knows exactly what they're referencing. Homan stared at the city lights in the distance. And that means this isn't just a legal war anymore, it's global. In the shadows of the garage, Myra Langdon stood with a flash drive in one hand, a revolver in the other. She had expected agents. But she hadn't expected the third person trailing them quietly from a nearby car. Someone wearing a congressional security badge. Someone who hadn't been seen on camera in over 2 years. And someone whose name, until now, was believed to be redacted by Aurora itself. Inside the garage beneath the National Archive Annex, the air was tense and cold. Pam Bondi stepped out of the SUV first, her heels clicking sharply across the cement. Tom Homan followed, scanning every corner like a soldier back on patrol. A single figure stood near a service elevator. Myra Langdon. She looked smaller in person, wrapped in a long coat, her silver hair tucked under a knit cap, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. In her left hand, a metal case. In her right, a flash drive. "You got followed," she said, voice low. Bondi tensed. "By who?" Myra nodded to the far corner. A dark sedan was parked with engines still running. "I don't know yet. But that car doesn't belong to the DOJ. And it's been idle for 8 minutes, long enough to be listening." Tom stepped in front, shielding the women. "You have what we came for." Myra raised the flash drive. Everything. Source code, access logs, internal memos. Aurora isn't just manipulating federal databases. It's writing false legal narratives in real time, then wiping them as if they never existed. Bondi took the drive and connected it to her secure tablet. The screen lit up with scrolling code, legal summaries, audio logs, and a chilling program window titled Judicial Sentiment Adjuster Active. "It doesn't just rewrite case histories," Myra said. "It predicts which judges will resist, and then it neutralizes them." Suddenly, a shadow moved across the rear wall of the garage. Homan shouted, "Down!" As a silence shot pinged off the steel frame near the elevator. Gunfire wasn't expected, but they were ready. A Homeland Security agent flanked them from behind a pillar and fired twice. The black-clad assailant dropped, groaning. Bondi pulled the mask off the attacker. The man wasn't from the DOJ or FBI. He had no agency ID, just a tattoo on his neck, a UTH Echo. P-39. Myra went pale. "That's a ghost unit. They're not supposed to exist anymore." "Define anymore," Bondi muttered. Back at the White House, the vice president sat alone in a secure briefing room, rewatching the footage of Boasberg's courtroom collapse. Her chief of staff entered quietly. "Ma'am, we've confirmed the documents exist. Homan and Bondi are moving to secure public release." The VP leaned forward. "And how long before someone tries to shut them down?" "We believe Echo Protocol is being activated. Possibly out of the Pentagon's Mythos division." The vice president stared at the ceiling for a moment, then made a call. "This is VP Karoline Marks. I want full domestic exposure authorization. Declassify program P-39 for congressional review immediately." There was a long silence on the other end. Then a man's voice. "Are you sure you want to do that?" "I'm not waiting for permission," she replied. "I'm giving you a deadline." In a bunker beneath Langley, a panel of men and women were watching satellite feeds of Washington, D.C. One of them turned to a general. "If the vice president exposes P-39, we lose 30 years of shadow architecture." Another analyst, younger, leaned in. "We don't just lose leverage, we lose the script." The general said nothing, then typed into a console, "Activate. Fallback, script burn." Elsewhere in the room, red lights flickered. Back in the garage, Homan and Bondi prepared to move Myra to a secure location when her encrypted phone buzzed. She picked it up only to hear breathing, then a calm voice. "Do not upload that data. If you do, we collapse the internet gate in less than 60 seconds. Myra looked at Bondi. "They're watching the routers." Another message came through this time, a text. P39 knows where you are, but we're not the only ones. There's another file you've missed, one that proves how deep this goes. Ask Homan. About Operation Sentinel Ghost. Bondi turned. What's that? Homan hesitated, his eyes suddenly hard. I was told it was a border monitoring project. But now I think it was training AI to mimic immigration judges. Fake ones. Digital ghosts. Presiding over real cases. Bondi's voice dropped. If that's true, then this isn't just about corrupt judges. It's about erasing the rule of law completely. The elevator doors opened. Inside, a man in a gray suit stood calmly, holding a badge. I'm here to take you to the Senate Intelligence Committee, he said, and you'd better hurry. They just voted to suspend federal court access systems indefinitely. As they rode up in silence, Bondi looked down at her phone. Another message blinked. You've triggered the echo. Now let's see who answers it. And above ground, across Capitol Hill, the bells of St. Matthew's Cathedral rang 3 times. A signal long forgotten, meant only for insiders of a system so secret, even most U.S. presidents never knew it existed.